There are few Bible prophecies that stir as much attention as Ezekiel 38. With its vivid imagery of a massive, multinational coalition descending upon Israel, it has become a central text in discussions about the end times. For decades, many pastors and prophecy teachers have pointed to world events involving Russia, Iran, and Israel as signs that the battle of Gog and Magog is on the horizon. Anytime Russia moves, or Iran threatens, or Israel retaliates, the trumpet is sounded. Ezekiel 38 is upon us. But is it heresy, or even dangerous to suggest that its fulfillment might be postponed? Not denied, not reinterpreted, but simply delayed. Could it be that God, in His sovereignty, is restraining this prophecy until certain conditions align more perfectly with the biblical text? Could it be that we are witnessing precursors, not the event itself? For some, even raising the question feels like a lack of faith or a denial of the prophetic word, but it's not. In fact, it's precisely because we believe in the accuracy of scriptures that we must take the timing seriously. This episode isn't about denying the truth of prophecy. It's about asking whether our timing may be premature and whether we have fallen into the habit of headline-driven theology rather than spirit-led discernment. Let's explore what it really means to believe in prophecy while also acknowledging the possibility of divine delay. Though I believe the Ezekiel 38 war may be postponed, that doesn't mean I doubt its future fulfillment. In fact, since 2020, we have seen an undeniable alignment of global trends that strongly support it. The rise of anti-Semitism in the West is one of the most alarming indicators. Jewish communities are facing a resurgence of hostility not seen in decades. After the October 7th Hamas attack and the ensuing war in Gaza, protests around the world quickly turned from pro-Palestinian support to overtly anti-Semitic rhetoric and violence. This global climate of hatred is preparing the soil for an international appetite to turn against Israel. The alliance between Russia, Iran, and Turkey, three of the key players in Ezekiel's prophecy, is a real thing. Since the outbreak of Russia's war in Ukraine, Iran has provided Russia with suicide drones, missiles, and other military technology. This relationship has pulled Russia and Iran closer together, not just in defense strategy, but in shared opposition to the West, and in particular to Israel. Meanwhile, Turkey has also been moving steadily into alignment with this bloc. President Erdogan has openly condemned Israel on multiple occasions, calling it a terrorist state, and its quiet cooperation with Iran on economic and security issues has raised eyebrows. Add to that Israel's massive natural gas reserves and the motivation for invasion becomes even more plausible. Ezekiel 38:12 mentions that Gog and his allies come to take plunder. With Europe looking to replace Russian energy sources, Israel has emerged as a new supply of natural gas, making it a strategic economic rival to Russia. For a cash-strapped Russia or an economically isolated Iran, these resources represent more than opportunity, they represent a threat and a target. And so while I may say that Ezekiel 38 is not being fulfilled right now, I do so with the full awareness that many of the prophetic pieces are already on the board. What we are waiting for is the exact timing of God's plan, when all these elements move from preparation to execution. Until then, we watch, not with skepticism, but with sober expectation. I want to look at 7 quick reasons why I think there may be delay. Now, the most obvious reason is that Israel is currently on high alert. The ongoing war with Hamas, the threat from Hezbollah, and Iranian aggression have pushed Israel into a heightened state of military readiness. When we look closely at Ezekiel 38 verses 10 and 11, the prophecy describes a very different scenario. It reads, "It will come to pass that thoughts will arise in your mind, and you will make an evil plan. You will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates." This is not a picture of a nation braced for war, but of one living in security and apparent peace, so confident that its people dwell without defenses. That's not Israel we see today. Right now, the fences are up, the gates are locked, the Iron Dome is active, and the streets echo with the sound of sirens. For Ezekiel 38 to unfold exactly as written, there must be a shift in Israel's security posture. On October 7, 2023, Israel was blindsided. Despite years of warning about Hamas, there was this widespread belief that deterrence was working. The border fence around Gaza was high-tech, the surveillance systems were cutting-edge, and the intelligence community was confident that any threat would be neutralized before it ever became real. But that illusion of safety collapsed in a single morning. On a Jewish holiday, while families were resting and celebrating, Hamas launched one of the most brutal and coordinated attacks in modern Israeli history. The shock wasn't just at the scale of the violence, it was the fact that it happened at all, right under Israel's nose. That's complacency. And we've seen this before. Back in 1973, exactly 50 years before, during the Yom Kippur War, Israel faced a same exact dynamic. All the signs were there that Egypt and Syria were preparing for war, but Israeli leadership was convinced that no attack was coming. They had this belief that the Arab states wouldn't dare strike. And so, on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, the invasion came. It was swift, devastating, and totally unexpected. Israel initially suffered heavy losses, but after regrouping, it launched a successful counteroffensive, resulting in a military victory. The shock of recent attacks have shaken the nation awake. As a result, it will likely take time, possibly years, before the current state of high alert fades and Israel once again settles into that vulnerable sense of security Ezekiel foretells. The second reason is Russia's devastation. We're now 3 years into Russia's war in Ukraine, and one thing is clear: the equipment reserves that once gave Russia an edge are drying up fast. Russia is losing around 500 armored vehicles and heavy equipment units every single month. In total, more than 15,000 Russian vehicles have been destroyed, damaged, abandoned, or captured. To put that in perspective, the Russian defense industry can build only around 200 new BMP-3 fighting vehicles and just 90 modern T-90M tanks a year. That's not even close to covering the monthly losses, much less rebuilding new units. So where are the replacements coming from? Not from high-tech factories, but from Cold War junkyards. Russia's been digging into old storage yards since 2022, pulling out dusty relics like the T-72s, T-62s, and even T-55 tanks, machines designed in the 70s, 60s, and 50s. But now even those storage yards are running empty. In some cases, they've resorted to sending troops into battle in civilian vehicles, cars, vans, motorcycles, and even electric scooters. Russia may be fighting, but they're fighting more and more on foot. Surely infantry on foot can defend and attack, but they can't punch through enemy lines the way armored columns can. In other words, the very backbone of modern warfare is crumbling under Russia's feet. Russia is bleeding men and machines at a staggering rate. Since the invasion in 2022, Russian military casualties have climbed towards the 1 million mark. Around 250,000 Russian troops have been killed, and over 750,000 more have been wounded, gone missing, or taken prisoner. And the losses aren't slowing down. Russia is reportedly losing around 1,000 soldiers per day. Despite these enormous sacrifices, the territory gain is minimal. In many places, Russian troops advance just 50 meters a day, barely half the length of a football field. This is a slow, agonizing crawl through fortified lines that crushes soldiers physically and psychologically. This kind of warfare is what analysts have called the meat grinder, a brutal tactic where waves of poorly equipped, often poorly trained troops, many of them convicts pulled from prisons, are sent into heavily defended Ukrainian positions. The goal isn't finesse or breakthrough, it's attrition. Overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers, regardless of the cost in human life, and that cost is enormous. Their logistics are strained. Their elite units are hollowed out, and their once feared military edge is now held together by aging Soviet-era equipment and desperate conscription. And yet, With all this destruction, they still haven't managed to take full control of the Donbass, let alone the rest of Ukraine. If Russia can barely make incremental gains, losing lives, weapons, and morale along the way, how will it ever invade Israel? So while Bible prophecy is true and Ezekiel 38 will happen, it's clear that Russia, in its current state, isn't capable of leading such a coalition. At least not yet. The third reason is Iran's dilemma. Since 2020, Iran has been rocked by a perfect storm of crises. From its ailing leadership to skyrocketing inflation, energy collapse, and raging corruption. Supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, now 85 and reportedly in failing health, presides over a regime that's lost control of its own economy and infrastructure. Inflation has surged to nearly 40% in spring 2025 and likely much higher in reality. The Iranian rial has lost over half its value since 2022, making it one of the world's weakest currencies. Basic goods like rice, cooking oil, and milk have doubled or tripled in price, while the minimum wage remains around US $120 per month, forcing families into poverty. Meanwhile, youth unemployment sits above 50% for males aged between 25 and 40, and roughly 57% of the population suffers from inadequate nutrition. Adding to the breakdown, Iran's once booming energy and gas sectors are collapsing under chronic mismanagement. Despite holding the world's second largest natural gas reserves and third largest oil reserves, Iran faces daily shortages of over 260 million cubic meters of gas, triggering rolling blackouts even in major provinces. Authorities have closed schools, government offices, and banks in 21 out of 31 provinces to conserve energy. Water scarcity is also acute. Reservoir levels are approximately 40% lower than in previous years, and key dams like La are just at 1% capacity, leaving agriculture and drinking water on the brink. All this is fueled by deep-seated corruption. Iran ranks near the bottom globally on Transparency International's index, with regime insiders siphoning funds while public services collapse. Can a state this unstable mount a coordinated attack on Israel? The sophisticated, multi-pronged invasion described in Ezekiel 38 demands capacity Iran simply does not have now. Not in leadership, not in resources, and not in national unity. This isn't a denial of prophecy, it's sober realism about timing. The fourth reason is the fall of Syria. The rise of Ahmed al-Sharaa to the presidency of Syria marks a stunning turn in Middle Eastern politics, and it sends a loud, clear message. Iran and Russia are no longer in control of the board. For years, Bashar al-Assad survived brutal uprisings and civil war only because of the strong backing from both Iran and Russia. Iran sent militias, weapons, and money. Russia provided air power, diplomatic cover, and military infrastructure. And yet, despite all that investment, Assad has fallen. Al-Sharaa, once commander of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS for short, initiated an offense in November 2024, which led to the overthrow of the entire country. Al-Sharaa now leads the nation, and he is no puppet of Iran or Russia. That shift didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen because Assad suddenly grew unpopular. It happened because Iran and Russia were too weak to keep him in power. When Assad needed support the most, they lacked the strength, focus, and resources to come to his rescue. If Russia can't hold Syria and Iran can't protect its own allies, how are they supposed to organize a surprise invasion of Israel? The coalition described in Ezekiel 38 requires strength, coordination, and momentum, none of which these nations currently have. What we are seeing instead is fatigue, fracture, and failure. The fifth reason is a civil war in Sudan, or Kush. Since 2023, Sudan has been locked in a devastating civil war between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces. The conflict has already claimed as many as 150,000 lives, with cities like Khartoum witnessing some of the deadliest urban battles in recent memory. Over 61,000 people killed there alone. Around 12 to 14 million people have been displaced from their homes, making Sudan the epicenter of the world's worst displacement crisis. The humanitarian crisis goes beyond bullets and bombs. Over 522,000 children have died from malnutrition and preventable diseases like cholera, measles, and malaria. Most hospitals are non-functional. In Khartoum, more than 70% of healthcare facilities have been destroyed or shut down. Clean water is scarce, medicine is nearly non-existent, and entire regions are sliding into famine. The brutality of this war has been amplified by horrifying acts of violence against civilians. In West Darfur, entire communities have been targeted in campaigns of ethnic cleansing. Rape, torture, and mass executions are being used as tools of terror. Women and girls have been kidnapped, abused, and murdered. Ethnic minorities like the Masalit have been specifically targeted by Arab militia, with their leaders and intellectuals systematically hunted down and their women threatened to be impregnated with, quote, Arab babies. Economically, Sudan is a nation in free fall. The economy has contracted by an estimated 40%, with food production and supply chains all but destroyed. More than half the population, over 25 million people, now rely on humanitarian aid just to survive. Inflation is out of control, the currency has collapsed, and looting has become widespread, even in aid convoys. The government no longer functions in large parts of the country. Sudan is one of the worst crises the modern world has witnessed, and it's happening right now. How can such a nation that can't look after itself be involved in a strategic coalition against Israel? The sixth reason is the divisions in Libya, or put in Ezekiel 38. Right now, Libya is not a unified nation. It's split between two rival governments that have been locked in a power struggle since the fall of Gaddafi back in 2011. On one side, you have the Government of National Unity, or GNU, based in Tripoli, led by Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deiba. This is the administration recognized by the EU, the US, and the UK, and interestingly, Turkey. Turkey was supposed to oversee the national elections and reunite the country, but those elections never happened. And Deiba, the United Nations-backed Prime Minister, has refused to step down, and that has created a lot of internal resistance. On the other side, in the east, you have a rival government backed by the Libyan House of Representatives, seated in Tobruk, with military support from Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army. They have appointed Osama Hamad as Prime Minister, and their backing comes from Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and even Russia. These two governments don't work together. They have got separate administrations, rival military forces, and no unified foreign policy. How can a nation this fractured join a military coalition to attack Israel? Libya can't even govern its own territory, let alone project force abroad. So when people start connecting Libya to the Ezekiel 38 alliance, we have to ask, which Libya? The one in Tripoli or the one in Tobruk? This is not to say it won't happen, but at this moment in time, it would be difficult for Libya to put all the pieces together. The seventh and final reason is that Israel currently has allies. When we read Ezekiel 38, one of the most striking details is that Israel stands alone. The invading coalition led by God comes down against a nation dwelling safely. And while a few bystanders like Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish ask, why have you come to take plunder? No one steps in to defend Israel. It's a moment of prophetic isolation. But look at the present moment. We're seeing something completely different. Israel has active allies. You may not have heard about the new Arab-Israeli axis and how it's reshaping Middle Eastern geopolitics. Take Jordan, for example. Just last April, Jordanian jets shot down dozens of Iranian drones that were heading towards Israel, violating Jordanian airspace. That wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was a clear sign of Jordan drawing the line to block Iranian aggression and actively defend Israel. Meanwhile, normalization continues to advance with momentum. The Abraham Accords have already brought the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco into open relations with Israel, including diplomatic ties, tourism, and trade. Behind the scenes, Countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt are quietly aligning with Israel against shared threats, even if full normalization is still tentative. What's driving this seismic shift? The common denominator is Iran. Sunni Arab states, and especially Gulf countries, now see Iran as a primary threat in the region. Their interests align more with Israel's when it comes to countering Tehran's influence than with any traditional animosity over Palestine. After all, it was Jordan's King Abdullah II who first popularized the term the Shia Crescent in 2004 to describe the growing influence of Iran in the Middle East. And so, what's emerging is a shared vision of regional stability that challenges the old divides. Then you have your traditional allies like the UK and the US. In April 2024, Iran launched a barrage of drones and missiles towards Israel. In response, RAF Typhoon fighters, alongside jets from the US and France, scrambled to intercept and repel those threats, preventing them from reaching Israeli skies. Then again last October, when Iran launched missiles towards Israel, 2 British Typhoons and a Voyager air-to-air refueling tanker were deployed in a defensive posture. Even though they didn't fire, they played a crucial role in deterrence and bolstering regional air defense. On the US side, American military support for Israel has also been robust. In June 2025, US forces, using missile defense systems and a naval destroyer in the eastern Mediterranean, helped intercept a large-scale Iranian missile barrage targeting Israel. The U.S. also regularly positions aircraft carriers and Navy assets nearby as a deterrent and operates early warning systems with Israel. It's a part of a long-standing commitment. America has provided around $3.8 billion a year in military aid, shared technology like the F-35 program, and maintains war stockpiles on Israeli soil. When Ezekiel 38 speaks of Israel's lacking allies, that's not the reality today. For the prophecy to play out as written, those alliances would need to break down, something that hasn't happened yet. Now, let me be clear. I'm not ruling out a sovereign move of God. Just because the chessboard doesn't look ready now doesn't mean it can't change overnight. God doesn't need decades to align nations. He can shift alliances, topple governments, and stir the hearts of leaders in a moment. We've seen it in history. Walls fall, empires collapse, and regimes rise and disappear almost as quickly. So while everything I've said points to a delay, I also fully acknowledge that God is still sovereign over prophecy, politics, and history. He holds the hearts of kings in his hand and can bring about the conditions of Ezekiel 38 in his timing, not ours. But let's also remember, scriptures like Ezekiel 38 must not be read in isolation. They're not meant to fuel hype, fear, or headline theology. Instead, they should spark biblical curiosity, like the Bereans who searched the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Prophecy isn't about jumping on trends, it's about digging deeper. The global events we see should pique our interest, not provoke panic. They should move us to study, to pray, and to watch, not to simply accept soundbites or echo popular rhetoric. The Bible speaks of the sons of Issachar, men who understood the times and knew what Israel ought to do. That's who we want to be, not just watchers of headlines, but people of understanding, discerning the season, anchored in scriptures, and be ready to respond wisely to whatever comes next. If you made it all the way to the end without pulling out your hair, congrats, you're a legend. If you like what you heard, go ahead and subscribe, share with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment. They say it helps with the algorithm. If you didn't like what you heard, tell me why in the comments. Just keep it classy, keep it clean. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.